October 23, 1942. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The thick jungle air reeked of gunpowder and decay, as Corporal James Mitchell knelt beside a fallen Japanese soldier near the airfield's perimeter. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion after 3 straight days of fighting. Beside the body lay something that caught his attention, a Type 100 submachine gun, its chrome-plated barrel gleaming in the filtered sunlight through the canopy. The weapon looked pristine, well-crafted, modern. Mitchell picked it up, feeling its weight, just 8.4 pounds compared to his M1 Garand's hefty 11.2 pounds with bayonet and sling. The Type 100 had a distinctive curved magazine, adjustable sights, even a bipod mount. It was lighter, it fired automatically, it carried more ammunition in a single magazine than his Garand's 8-round M-block clip. For a moment Mitchell considered the trade, then he set the Japanese weapon aside and kept his Garand. That simple decision, repeated thousands of times across the Pacific by Marines and soldiers just like him, would reveal profound truths about what actually wins wars. Because on paper the Type 100 looked like the better weapon, in reality, it wasn't even close. This story begins not with guns but with philosophy. 2 nations, 2 completely different approaches to warfare, and 2 weapons that embodied everything their creators believed about combat. In January 1936, after years of debate and testing, the United States Army officially adopted the M1 Garand as its standard service rifle. This was revolutionary. For the first time in history, a major military power would equip its entire frontline infantry with semi-automatic rifles, rather than bolt-action weapons. The path to this adoption had been anything but smooth. John Garand, a Canadian-born engineer, had joined Springfield Armory in Massachusetts in 1919. He was a perfectionist, a man who understood both mechanical engineering and the brutal realities of military service. His early designs failed testing. Ammunition changes forced complete redesigns. Army brass questioned whether soldiers even needed semi-automatic fire. Budget constraints threatened everything. But Garand persisted, refining his design throughout the 1920s and early 1930s. His rifle used a gas-operated rotating bolt action. When fired, expanding gases were tapped from the barrel through a port, driving a piston that operated the bolt. The bolt rotated to unlock, extracted the spent cartridge, ejected it, and loaded a fresh round from the 8-round clip. The entire cycle occurred in fractions of a second, allowing a skilled rifleman to fire as fast as he could pull the trigger while maintaining his sight picture and aim. The M1 Garand fired the powerful potful 30-06 Springfield cartridge, the same ammunition used in the bolt-action M1 90-03 Springfield rifle. This 30 caliber round had been standardized in 1906, hence the designation AUT-6. It fired a 150-grain bullet at approximately 2,800 feet per second, generating roughly 2,650 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. This gave the round tremendous range, penetration, and stopping power. The decision to maintain this caliber ensured ammunition compatibility across the entire arsenal and preserved the lethality American military planners demanded. The rifle itself weighed 9.5 pounds unloaded, with a 24-inch barrel and an overall length of 43.6 inches. The walnut stock and steel construction made it robust and durable. The adjustable rear aperture sight allowed precise shooting at varying ranges. In trained hands, the weapon could effectively engage targets beyond 500 yards, though most combat occurred at much closer ranges. General George S. Patton would famously call it the greatest battle implement ever devised. But in 1942, as the 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal in August, this praise remained theoretical. Many Marines still carried M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles. The M1 Garand remained in relatively short supply, with production having ramped up slowly. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japan had followed a completely different path. Throughout the 1930s, Japanese military doctrine emphasized 3 elements: rifle marksmanship at long range, bayonet charges at close range, and machine gun support for both. The concept of a submachine gun, a weapon firing pistol-caliber ammunition at high rates of fire, found little favor with Japanese military planners steeped in centuries-old traditions. This began to change dramatically in 1937, when Japanese forces encountered Chinese troops using submachine guns effectively during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Battle of Shanghai, which raged from August through November 1937, proved particularly instructive. In dense urban environments, Chinese soldiers armed with various submachine guns could lay down devastating close-range fire during street fighting. Japanese infantry armed primarily with bolt-action Type 38 rifles found themselves outgunned in building-to-building combat. The shock of Shanghai forced Japanese military planners to reconsider. In August 1937, immediately after experiencing the effectiveness of Chinese submachine guns in urban combat, the Imperial Japanese Army initiated development of their own submachine gun. Lieutenant General Kojiro Nambu, designer of the famous Nambu pistol, received orders to create a Japanese submachine gun based on imported Bergmann designs they had studied. Development proceeded through several experimental models. Finally, in 1940, the Imperial Japanese Army formally adopted the weapon as the Type 100 submachine gun, the designation referring to the Japanese Imperial year 2600. Here's where the numbers tell their own story. The Type 100 fired the 8mm Nambu cartridge, officially designated 8x22mm Nambu. This pistol round fired a 102-grain bullet at approximately 1,050 feet per second, generating only 242 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. This represented less than one-tenth the power of the .30-06 fired by the M1 Garand. The weak cartridge limited effective range to approximately 150 meters under ideal conditions, though practical combat range proved much shorter. Think about that for a moment. Less than one-tenth the power. At typical Pacific Island engagement ranges of 100 to 300 yards, the Type 100 simply couldn't reach targets that the M1 Garand could destroy with aimed fire. The 8mm Nambu round failed to penetrate even light cover that the .36 punched through effortlessly. Dense jungle vegetation that barely slowed the powerful Garand round would deflect the weak pistol cartridge entirely. The weapon itself featured a simple blowback-operated mechanism firing from an open bolt. The cyclic rate of fire varied by model. The early Type 100's 40 fired at approximately 450 rounds per minute. The later simplified Type 100's 44 increased this to 800 rounds per minute. The weapon fed from a curved 30-round magazine inserted horizontally on the left side, an unusual configuration that made the weapon awkward to handle in confined spaces. Production occurred at Kokura Arsenal and Nagoya Arsenal, with the weapon designed by Nambu Arms Manufacturing Company. Total production numbers remain disputed due to incomplete wartime records. Japanese military historian Shigo Sugawa documented approximately 10,000 units produced, with nearly 9,000 being the later simplified model. Some Western sources estimate up to 30,000 units may have been manufactured, though the lower figure appears more credible based on Japanese records. Compare that to American production. Between 1936 and 1945, American factories produced approximately 5.4 million M1 Garandas. Springfield Armory manufactured 3.5 million. Winchester contributed 513. This massive production occurred while America simultaneously produced Sherman tanks, B-29 bombers, Liberty ships, and every other tool of modern warfare. Japan produced at most 30,000 Type 100s, more likely just 10,000. That's less than 1% of American rifle production. What does this tell you about industrial capacity? About the ability to sustain a modern war? Every number, every statistic pointed to the same conclusion. America could outproduce Japan by margins so overwhelming that tactical innovation could never compensate for material disadvantage. But let's get back to the men who actually had to use these weapons. When Marines did encounter Type 100s, either captured or taken from dead Japanese soldiers, they invariably rejected them after brief examination. The reasons were immediately apparent to combat veterans. The Type 100 suffered from numerous design flaws that became apparent under combat conditions. The complex bayonet lug and bipod mounting system added unnecessary weight and manufacturing complexity. The horizontal magazine made the weapon difficult to fire from cover. The safety mechanism proved unreliable. The rear sight, optimistically graduated to 1,500 meters on early models, bore no relationship to the weapon's actual capabilities. Most critically, Marines had no reliable source of 8mm Nambu ammunition. Using a captured weapon meant depending on captured ammunition, a risk no Marine would willingly take when his life depended on his weapon functioning. The M1 Garand, by contrast, offered Marines everything they needed for survival in Pacific combat. The semi-automatic action allowed rapid aimed fire without losing sight picture. A trained Marine could deliver 8 rounds accurately, in less than 10 seconds, then reload with a fresh en-bloc clip in under 3 seconds. The powerful .30-06 cartridge could penetrate Japanese bunkers, destroy light fortifications, and stop enemy soldiers instantly at any practical combat range. Reliability proved paramount in the harsh Pacific environment. The Garand functioned in mud, sand, salt water and jungle humidity that would have destroyed more delicate weapons. The gas system, while requiring maintenance, proved remarkably tolerant of fouling. The operating rod and bolt could be cleared and lubricated in seconds. Parts were completely interchangeable between rifles. Every Marine knew that his Garand would fire when he pulled the trigger, regardless of conditions. They never worried about running out of .30-06 ammunition. They never questioned whether a round would fire or function properly. Training created the final advantage. Every Marine learned to shoot, clean, maintain and repair the M1 Garand during basic training. They understood the weapon intimately. They could disassemble and reassemble it blindfolded. They knew its capabilities and limitations. They trusted it because they understood it. The Type 100 remained an unknown, a foreign weapon with unfamiliar characteristics and uncertain performance. In combat, Marines never gambled with their lives. Manufacturing quality tells another part of this story. Early production Type 100 models showed reasonable fit and finish. By 1944 and 1945, with Japanese industry collapsing under bombing and blockade, Type 100 specimens exhibited rough machining, poor welding, and inferior materials. Chrome lining disappeared from barrels. Wooden stocks gave way to crude fabrications. Tolerances loosened to the point where reliability, already marginal, became entirely unpredictable. American production quality remained consistently high throughout the war. Every Garand was completely interchangeable with every other Garand. Every part was standardized. Every weapon was reliable. American mass production represented the pinnacle of industrial capability, emphasizing standardization, interchangeability, and rigorous quality control at massive scale. The contrast extended to ammunition production. American industry produced approximately 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition during World War II, including over 10 billion rounds of .36. Japanese production of 8mm Nambu ammunition totaled less than 100 million rounds for all weapons using that cartridge, including pistols. Marines in the Pacific could expend ammunition freely, knowing that unlimited supplies would arrive with each convoy. Japanese forces hoarded every round, knowing that resupply was uncertain at best. During the October 23 through 26 battle for Henderson Field, Marines of the 7th Marine Regiment faced massive Japanese attacks attempting to retake the airfield. In the desperate fighting, Marines with M1 Garands could engage Japanese troops at ranges where enemy rifle fire remained ineffective. The rapid semi-automatic fire of the Garand allowed individual Marines to break up Japanese assault formations before they could close to effective range. Private First Class Mitchell Page, manning a machine gun position during this battle, would later receive the Medal of Honor for his actions. When Japanese forces overran adjacent positions, Page and the riflemen around him held their ground. The M1 Garands of the supporting riflemen provided the volume of accurate fire needed to prevent the Japanese from exploiting their breakthrough. Page himself would later credit the firepower of Garand-armed Marines with helping save his position. The Battle of Tarawa, in November 1943, demonstrated the M1 Garand's effectiveness in the most brutal conditions. The 2nd Marine Division encountered Japanese forces equipped with a mixture of weapons, including limited numbers of Type 100 submachine guns issued to special naval landing forces defending the island. In the brutal 76 hours of combat, these weapons proved utterly inadequate against Marines armed with M1 Garands. The Japanese defenders, forced to fight from fixed positions, could not exploit the submachine gun's theoretical advantage in close combat. Meanwhile, Marines could engage and destroy Japanese positions at ranges where the Type 100 couldn't even reach. The Battle of Iwo Jima from February through March 1945 provided perhaps the ultimate test. The volcanic ash of Iwo Jima created unique challenges for weapons maintenance. Yet the Garand continued functioning when more delicate weapons failed. Marines could clear their rifles quickly and return to action. The 27 Medals of Honor awarded for actions at Iwo Jima often cited effective rifle fire in their narratives, testament to the M1 Garand's importance in individual combat actions. So what does all this tell us? What's the lesson here that extends beyond just World War II? On paper, the Type 100 had advantages. It was lighter, it fired automatically, it carried more ammunition. But war isn't fought on paper. War is fought in mud, in rain, in sand, in heat, in conditions where only the most reliable equipment survives. The M1 Garand proved that true combat effectiveness comes not from rate of fire or perceived modernity, but from entirely different principles: reliability, power, and consistent effectiveness. The mathematics of this preference told a story about two fundamentally different approaches to warfare. Japan prioritized theoretical advancement over practical reliability. America chose proven effectiveness over innovation. In jungle combat, where weapon failure meant death, that choice proved decisive. When the war ended in August 1945, American occupation authorities issued remaining stocks of Type 100s to Japanese police forces, where the weapons limitations mattered far less than in military combat. Few examples survive today in museums and private collections. Most were destroyed, lost in the chaos of defeat, or simply forgotten. The weapon remains a footnote in military firearms history, a cautionary example of a design that looked advanced on paper, but failed in practice. The M1 Garand continued in American military service through the entire Korean War from 1950 to 1953, where it again proved superior to submachine guns in most combat situations. The weapon directly influenced development of the M14 rifle, which was essentially an M1 Garand modified to use a 20-round detachable box magazine and capable of selective fire. The core design principles of the Garand, prioritizing reliability, power, and effectiveness over all other considerations, influenced American military small arms development for decades afterward. Let's return to where we started. October 23, 1942. Henderson Field. Corporal James Mitchell, kneeling beside that fallen Japanese soldier, holding that Type 100 submachine gun. Why did he make the choice he made? Why did thousands of Marines and soldiers make that same choice throughout the Pacific War? Because Mitchell knew something that would take military historians decades to fully analyze. He knew that in combat, the best weapon isn't the most modern, or the most advanced on paper. The best weapon is the one that works every single time you need it, the one that fires when you pull the trigger, the one that hits what you aim at, the one that stops the enemy when you hit him, the one that keeps working when everything else fails. Mitchell survived the war. He lived to age 91. When asked decades later about his decision that day on Guadalcanal, Mitchell said something simple but profound. I never considered taking that Japanese gun, because my Garand had never let me down, and I knew it never would. That trust, multiplied across hundreds of thousands of Marines and soldiers, helped win the Pacific War. One Marine with one M1 Garand possessed more practical firepower than multiple Japanese soldiers with any combination of weapons. That individual superiority, multiplied across entire divisions, created overwhelming tactical advantages. Those tactical advantages, accumulated across dozens of island battles, produced strategic victory. The M1 Garand wasn't just the greatest battle implement ever devised, as Patton stated. It was a war-winning weapon that validated American industrial democracy's ability to outproduce and outfight totalitarian adversaries. When the last Marines departed Japan after occupation duty in the late 1940s, many purchased their service rifles through the Director of Civilian Marksmanship program, keeping the weapons that had kept them alive. These rifles became family heirlooms, passed to children and grandchildren with stories of Pacific battles. The Type 100s remained in Japan, most destroyed during occupation, others rusting in forgotten warehouses, unwanted reminders of defeat and technological inadequacy. The comparison between M1 Garand and Type 100 ultimately transcends mere technical specifications or battlefield performance. It represents the difference between democratic industrial capacity and authoritarian limitations, between pragmatic engineering and impractical tradition, between weapons designed by users and weapons imposed on users. Marines chose the M1 Garand because it worked. They rejected the Type 100 because it didn't. In war, that simple distinction makes all the difference between victory and defeat, between survival and death, between coming home and remaining forever on some Pacific island. The story of these two weapons teaches us something timeless about military technology that remains relevant today. Advanced is not the same as effective. Modern is not the same as superior. Features do not equal function. Complexity does not ensure capability. In actual combat, simple, reliable, and powerful beats complex, unreliable, and weak every single time. That's the lesson Corporal Mitchell understood instinctively on October 23rd. That's the lesson that helped win the Pacific War. And that's the lesson that continues to guide military thinking about infantry weapons, 8 decades later.